That's it, thank you. We're recording.
Okay, good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, officers. Welcome to the Staffing Matters Urgent Review Subcommittee. We have 4 items on the agenda to get through. This is a reminder to the public. This is a remote meeting of the council. We are streaming live onto the council's YouTube channel. We are not in control of the comment section, so if you are commenting, please do so considerately towards others. In a moment, I will ask members to unmute themselves as we ask for declarations of interest, and then we will note the minutes of the or vote on the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October before looking at the grant support available to businesses, both in terms of the second lockdown 2.0, but also for the 19 days in which the council and our borough area was in tier 2 restrictions. Spoiler alert, this is complicated. So if you have a pen and paper, you may need it. But I know that Owen's team have done brilliant work on this, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. There are no apologies. We are a full house of members. Members, is there any declarations of interests that you wish to raise? Councillor Headley?
Only the usual one, that I'm also an elected member on Essex County Council, where a similar scheme may or may not be discussed.
Okay. Any other member? No one is indicating. Thank you, members. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? There are none. Karina, do we take a vote on this? Or is note them for PNR?
No, take a vote on the minutes, please.
Yeah, okay. Members, if you can unmute yourself from now. And Councillor Smith, how do you vote on the minutes?
In favour.
Councillor Baggott?
Agreed.
Councillor Headley?
Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the last meeting, so I'll have to abstain.
Okay, thank you. And I'll vote in favour. So the minutes are carried. Agenda item 4 are the local restrictions support grant. By way of introduction to this, I'd just say that both the Chief Executive and I have been on a number of calls in the last 48 hours with various different councils. We are seeking to have a unified approach across Essex to this. But our revenue and benefits team have done sterling work, not just here in Basildon, to make sure that when we look at these grants and we look at how if we approve them, and we're minded to approve them today, that the application forms and the payment terms are able to be put out immediately. Yes, we have to protect against fraud. Yes, we have to make sure that every business that is applying is eligible. But this is the second time we've done this. So we know most of these businesses now. We know their needs, and we're able to get that money to them as quickly as possible. And that is work that's been done here that has been done faster than anywhere else in Essex. And that's because Shanna and Rob have led the way across Essex on this. And that's a huge job of work over the course of the last few weeks. And we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for that work. To explain the report, Owen, can we turn our cameras on if we are revenue and benefits officers? If I can bring you in, Owen, to introduce the report, and then Rob and is Shanna on the call, or is it just you, Rob?
I'm on the call. Apologies, just not on camera.
Yeah, okay, all right. So Owen, over to you.
If I do a quick introduction, I'm sure Rob and Shanna can set you out the policy and the details. So obviously, members be aware there's been lots of announcements over the last few weeks, really coming from the second lockdown, how we can support businesses in the community really through these challenging times. So the report, there's in the background, there's 4 main grants that we're talking about today. 3 of them are mandatory schemes. There's limited flexibility. The first one is the local restrictions support grant, and that relates to where we went into tier 2. Members will remember before the national lockdown come into force. So we're actually in tier 2 for 19 days. And there's support given to local businesses in respect of that. So that's the first one. Although that is a discretionary scheme, the council's looking to deliver the scheme in line with the MHCLG guidelines and in line with the national communications that went to the public. The second grant scheme we're looking at is the local restricted support scheme for businesses that are closed, and that's businesses that have been forced to close because of the national lockdown since it came into force. And the third one is a localised restrictions grant for sectors. So members will be aware that some sectors of business have been closed since the first lockdown. Mainly that is nightclubs and bars. There's only a couple of them, but they have been closed throughout that whole period. And the government is now introducing some support for those particular businesses, but only from the 1st of November. So it's not backdated to when they originally closed. So there's 3 grants, and the one we wanted to focus on today particularly is additional restrictions grant. That's a discretionary scheme, and that is to cover the period from the 5th of November to the 31st of March 2022. So it's for that 18-month period, and that is discretionary for the council to support businesses who obviously had restricted trading, and especially in some of those key areas like leisure, like hospitality. And attached to the report is the actual policy. And again, perhaps Rob and Shannon might want to take you through that in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Owen. Rob, do you want to come in at this stage and talk through the 4 different grant areas?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we have, as Owen touched on, we had 4 new grants for Essex local authorities to administer, which came into effect on the 17th of October and onwards. The first is the Local Restriction Support Grant Open, which is for businesses that were not legally required to close, but were significantly impacted by restrictions. That does cover the period of 17th of October to the 4th of November, which is 19 days. I will share this document with everyone, by the way, to save lots of notes being taken, just because it's quite detailed. So that's for 19 days, and that's what we call it when we're in Tier 2. Whilst there's discretion with this scheme, we're delivering a scheme in line with MHCLG's guidelines and in line with national communications that's been to the public. So we'll be supporting businesses within the hospitality, hotel, bed and breakfast and the leisure sectors. There is a funding being allocated to us of just over £292,000 for this Tier 2. And from the businesses we've dealt with previously and what we know from our own database is we're expecting to be able to help around 275 businesses for that 19-day period. We then have the second grant, which is the Local Restrictions Support Grant Closed, and this is businesses that are legally required to close and have been significantly impacted by restrictions for the period of 5th of November to the 2nd of December. So it is a set 28-day period. This is what we call our lockdown, national lockdown period. So this support is for businesses that are in a ratings list, so they have business rates to pay or business rate liability, and grants are awarded based on the rateable value that the businesses fall within. So if it's under £15,000 rateable value, they'll have £1,334 each for that 4-week period. If it's between £15,000 and £51,000 rateable value, they'll get £2,000 for that 28-day period. And if the rateable value is £51,000 and above, so the larger businesses, they're entitled to a £3,000 payment. Again, we've had initial funding allocated to us, which is just over £1.8 million. And we estimate from our database that there's 1,200 businesses currently, roughly, who can apply and would be entitled to the closed grant. Businesses that are able to continue to trade because they don't depend on providing in-person services and that can remotely work, such as accountancy firms and solicitors, are not eligible to claim the closed grant for lockdown grant. The third one, very briefly, is the local sector grant. This is, as Owen said, for nightclubs, of which we have 2 in a borough, and they can get £3,000 every 4 weeks. Out of interest, the ones that we do have won't be entitled because for a number of reasons, but there's only 2, so not to worry about. The first 3 schemes don't require member approval, but the scheme that does require member approval, and what we'd like to discuss with you today, is the Additional Restrictions Grant Scheme, the full scheme. And this is the discretionary scheme. Its period of entitlement is from the 5th of November this year until the 31st of March 2022. And the funding allocation for that is just over 3.7, so £3.743 million. And as funding needs to be available up until March 2022, and as the funding has been capped at £3.7 million, I'm sure you can appreciate it does cause issues on modelling of how we spend, what we spend and who we spend, given the length of time the grant must cover, and obviously all of the unknowns between now and then. The Additional Restrictions Grant was announced on the 31st of October. It's outlined in further guidance to us on the 9th of November, so this is all still pretty fresh for us. We're still getting live Q&As on this, and it does change on a regular basis. It is a discretionary scheme. It does require member endorsement, as I've said, and it is aimed at businesses that have been adversely impacted by the national and local COVID levels imposed by the spread of COVID-19. Central businesses have been given, as I said, £3.7 million through Basildon to support. Central government has said they're committed to provide new burdens funding to local authorities who are administering the schemes to help support getting these payments out timely and quickly. The funding is finite, and therefore we are keen to ensure that grants are given to the maximum number of businesses, and we're conscious that the expenditure cannot exceed the amounts the government has allocated to us. And in order to fairly administer the scheme, the council's decided that awards will be determined by holding multiple application windows, and the number of windows will depend on the number of applications and the national COVID position. Any businesses wishing to claim or apply will complete an online claim form on the council website, which we're hoping will be available from early next week, and awards will be considered against criteria set out within without the policy, which is set out in closure number 2. Council officers will administer the scheme, but as part of this report, it's recommended that it be agreed that the Section 151 officer is authorised to make technical scheme amendments as and when needed. The policy aims to help businesses with their fixed property related costs. So if they're in financial hardship and they have fixed property related costs, we've run models that consider that we ensure as many businesses as possible can receive this funding. And this is especially for those who don't have business rates, so those who don't claim the normal closed scheme grant, so those that possibly could slip through the net. It's important to remember that, again, the intention of these grants is to provide support with their business related costs. It's not support supposed to subsidise earnings. There are schemes like the furlough and the self-employed income support schemes, which are to support earnings. But all 4 schemes are subject to an application process that the officers will support and work through, and they are also subject to state aid requirements, and they're all taxable as well. So whatever income is received from these is taxable. The new support scheme for these business grants is just over £5.8 million to the borough, which I think is fantastic. It's new funding, and this is in addition to the original £31.3 million which we paid out in grants earlier this year, and £36 million in business relief that was already paid out to businesses in the first 6 months of the year. And in addition to this, just to note that we continue to deliver test and trace payments for those people who can't work, who are restricted at home, to support residents throughout the borough. So we've asked that you approve the policy as set out in closure number 2, which is the preferred option, and not to do nothing, as the scheme will then be delivered without member oversight. And again, Shanna, Owen and I are happy to take any questions on this.
Cheers, Rob. That's really good. Before I bring members in, can I ask Scott first, and then Shanna, do you have anything to add? Scott, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's really just Councillor Headley rightly raised the point earlier around the Essex County Council scheme. Just really to give you some comfort, Tony, is one that we have been working with Essex as well as part of this scheme. Essex received funding under the LRG of 2.2 million, which was allocated towards supporting businesses as part of the early restrictions. They have decided to pause that now while we concentrate on this ARG scheme, and then potentially look at how some of that money could support this scheme moving forward, or equally look at how they can support businesses in the new year. So it is something that Essex County Council officers and through the Essex Legion Chief Execs that Essex was supportive of in the proposals that you're seeing forward, with each district council having local elements as described earlier.
Thank you, Scott. Shanna, do you have anything you want to add before we open this up?
No, nothing to add. It's been covered fully. Thank you.
Okay, members, I'll open this up to you. If you could indicate if you wish to come in and speak on this. It was a fairly conclusive and comprehensive report from Rob and Shanna there. Any member wish to come in? Councillor Headley? Councillor Headley.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the scheme, but I've been reading through the detail of it, and I noticed that in the criteria for eligibility, it mentions leisure. Can I ask, I may have missed it, and if I have, I apologise. The council, Basildon Council, has a number of community assets which are largely used and run by community associations to support leisure. One in my ward would be Hannekins Farm. Would they be eligible under this scheme? I think in terms of Langdon Community Centre, it's probably too late. Or are they not treated as businesses as such under this criteria? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Headley. Rob, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I would encourage them to apply through the ARG scheme. I mean, we will look at the holistic approach of the business, what their income is, what the turnover is, what the restrictions are, and if we can support them, we will do. But they need to make an application, and obviously they'd have to, if they've got reasonable costs which they still have to pay whilst they're not working fully, then we possibly could support. Yes.
Thank you. That.
Thank you, and Rob, just to put some flesh on it, I think if I'm correct in saying from the numbers we discussed the other day, in terms of the retrospective 19 days in Tier 2, we expect that to be around 275 businesses who are eligible for that support. And going forward with the discretionary scheme, we are expecting over 1,200 businesses who are eligible for both the two other schemes in the ARG.
Well, sorry, just to clarify, yeah, the earlier 19-day period is 275 businesses we're estimating. For the lockdown, for the current lockdown 28 days, there's 1,200 businesses who have a business rates liability who will automatically qualify. And then we're expecting, hand in the air how many, over 1,000 we think applying for the discretionary part.
Okay, so really important for members to get the message out that even if you are a business not paying business rates, there is still support available for you here. So get in touch. We were asked a lot, weren't we, back in March around, you may be in a communal office space and you may be paying your rates as part of your rent, whatever. Actually, now you will be eligible for some of that support as well. Owen, you're waving.
I was going to say, also, as part of what we'll do the communications campaign jointly with Essex, independently as well. And obviously, Rob and his team, they know who've applied historically to discretionary grants. Again, we'll be proactively contacting everybody. So obviously, we will follow that through with a full, robust communications campaign and actively contacting people. Because any support we can get from yourselves with businesses know is obviously appreciated and valuable.
Okay. And that includes as well another one around market traders and demonstrating fixed costs, etc. But making sure that they're applying and getting the message out through BTCM and those guys to our market traders, and then London and Cambridge and the others around the borough. Councillor Baggott.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to add from our position, our thanks to the team because I appreciate how hard all the officers have been working throughout the entire lockdown period and pandemic. But on this is certainly something where we're able to be adding value collectively to the businesses that are suffering and hopefully get what is needed for them to be able to continue trading as we progress forward. So I appreciate the hard work that's gone in from officers, especially when it gets to technical details and making sure it's right and rolling it out so that it is actually out there for businesses across the borough. That it's something, if they're eligible, that they can go for. So thank you very much from us for the work that's been put in.
Yeah, very well said. And just earlier this morning as well, both Shanna and Rob on a call with the BBG. So that dialogue, that comms has already started to get out there and the message out there. But we need to push this as much as we can. The message very simply, if you are a business in this borough, please get in touch and see what you are eligible for. And fill in those application forms. And again, and I won't praise IT because I know that annoys Rob, but the revenue and benefits team have all of the application forms in-house. They've done it themselves. They're all ready to go. And so that, as I said, our payment runs have been updated as well, so that we're in a really, really good place to get money out to businesses quicker as well. So as soon as those application forms go live, encourage people to get on them, fill them out, and the team is ready to stand there, look at it, protect the council, protect against fraud, obviously, we know that, but also to make sure that the money gets out to those businesses as quickly as possible. So that is a very welcome move from Rob and Shanna and all of the team. Members, are there any further questions or comments that any member wishes to make? Councillor Harrison.
I was just going to ask the question of Rob. On all the schemes so far, Rob, has there been much evidence of fraudulent claims?
Actually no, we've had 6 cases out of all of the thousands we've given out in help, thousands of cases we've helped people, where we're looking into different avenues, whether there's been a bank account issue but nothing fraudulent. But we have a very, very good fraud team within the council. We're looking at all of these, and they will look at these moving forward as well. And I'm confident with the processes that we put in place, the amount of things we put in place to mitigate fraud in the first place, by making people fill out application forms, by making people provide the right bank details, by us checking through the ways that we have to check that people aren't being fraudulent initially, that we're confident we're paying for things pretty well.
Very good, very good. Members, no one else is indicating, in which case the recommendations are on the supplementary agenda on page 3. I'll take recommendations 1 and 2 together. If you can unmute yourselves as members, and we will take the vote. Councillor Smith.
In favour.
Councillor Baggott.
Agreed.
Oh, can you say that again? You just broke up.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Headley.
Agreed.
And I vote in favour as well. Thank you, members. The recommendations are carried. And thank you to Rob and Shanna again, and Owen, and the team will get comms lined up so that we can get this out and about now, so that people can start applying immediately and we can get that money released to our businesses. So thank you, officers. Thank you, members. That concludes our meeting today. If I can ask